whenever it does happen, I'm going to make a fucking big deal out of it. Like, because people have been asking it for so long. I'm literally going to be like, yo, there better be like 400 people at the first show, like straight up. Like I get Instagram DMs about this all the time. Like, y'all better show out when shows come back. Like straight up.
Officially ready to go. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. We travel down to Kentucky to talk with the riff wizard of the Midwest, Isaac from Knocked Loose and Inclination. Thank you for coming on the podcast with me today.
Dude, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually, I have a bunch of homies that have done this, and I'm also a listener, so I'm very stoked to be.
Yeah, I mad appreciate that. Isaac is a very busy man, and I've sent out a couple feelers for people, but I'm really glad that we're sitting down here and making this happen. So before we get super into it, do you want to give a proper intro for the bands you're a part of and what you do and how you're known in music?
Yeah, I mean, the band that most people would probably know me for would be my main time touring band, which is Knocked Loose. We started in 2013 and have been on the road consistently since 2014, 2015. So I usually, up until COVID times, had a very busy schedule going around everywhere. But especially more, locally, I play in a bunch of hardcore bands in Louisville. Inclination being probably the one that's gotten the most traction or been the most places. But I've been playing in like Louisville hardcore bands for a while. Traveling around, going to shows, going to fests, doing that whole thing. So I'm around in the touring context and also around in the hardcore context as well.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to be chatting about both projects and some of the things that you've kept yourself busy on the music side. Before we get going officially, I got to do the bev check. You've taken a few sips yourself, which is encouraged. I did this on a previous podcast. I didn't check this same bev, but I've made it a thing where I'm only going to be drinking this with guests whose bands make me want to mosh, because this bev is the closest word to mosh. So for the audio listeners, it's a Mash is the brand, and it's a watermelon lemon lime. So very exciting.
Is it as good as the name, or are you buying it mostly for the name?
Well, there is. I've only seen 3 here in Calgary. There's a grapefruit, an orange, and one other. I think it's like blackberry something. But we were out in Jasper last weekend, and they only had this. So had to pick it up, and felt appropriate for this podcast. So
absolutely.
What are you sipping on?
Well, so I don't drink coffee, right? And I don't at all. And this is a hot chocolate, very seasonal drink.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm putting respect on the name right now is because I love everything about coffee besides the way it tastes, right?
Okay.
I love the names of coffee. I love how it's made. I love how it smells. I love coffee shops. I think they're all sick. The only thing I don't like is the actual taste of the coffee. So sometimes during the winter when it's cold outside, I'll go inside and I'll get a hot chocolate instead, and feel like it's a pretty common theme to shit on people for getting hot chocolate at a coffee spot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put respect on the name, because I think I deserve a nice hot treat just as much as anyone else who drinks things that taste like metal melted into a cup.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sipping on a hot chocolate, and it's nice. It warms me up, and I can only drink it one season out of the year. So why not take advantage of it?
Yeah, yeah. Coffee is definitely an all year round drink, but hot chocolate, there's something around the
Yeah,
holidays and
it's a
stuff.
holiday thing. You won't catch me any other time of year drinking one.
Right.
If someone would be allowed to shit on me for it if it was like spring and I was still like, yo, like you got that hot chocolate. Like I get that.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
sure.
Can't really do that as an ice drink either because
No,
it's like
no,
hot chocolate.
no, yeah.
I do
Also,
know. Sorry, you go.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say that like no one can give me shit for drinking hot chocolate if they drink Starbucks coffee.
Mm,
Is
yeah.
a big one.
Yeah, yeah. There's been plenty of people coming on the podcast here to say like Starbucks is undrinkable. I literally had a podcast earlier today just talking with someone on how like Tim Hortons is like kind of gun to your head like I need
Yeah.
some caffeine in me, but it's not a personal go-to for me.
No,
Sorry.
because that's the thing. It's not. That's the thing is that it's not undrinkable. It's just sugary dessert drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you want just sugar high, then go for it.
Sure.
But you have to know that you're drinking ice cream and you gotta admit to it.
Right. I will update you because you did ask this. This mad fucks. It's very, very tasty.
I'm glad that it is as dope as the name is.
Yeah. A huge goal, I think, for past the 100 episode mark for this podcast is just get all the Bev sponsorships that I can.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
trying to put that out into the world.
Yeah, MASH Starbucks.
Well, I'm trying to remember what the name, because we don't have it up here in Canada. But I think it's I did an episode with PacSun, and he checked a Liquid Death sparkling water.
Yeah.
So I would mad love a Liquid Death, because that's kind of in the metal space as well. But we're getting a little off topic here.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's all good. So Isaac, if you've listened to the podcast as I know you have, you kind of know how I start all these, kind of getting context around how my guests got into hardcore or heavier music. So let's go back in time. Give me kind of like the Isaac hardcore origin story and some of those formative albums, moments where you heard screaming and breakdowns for the first time, and we'll start there.
Yeah. I'll kind of give a Cliff Notes version. Just I could talk for years on
Right.
it, but
yeah.
My dad was an essential person in getting me into like guitar music and heavy music in general. My mom was like Christian contemporary gospel music, so I grew up with that. And then my father was, also listened to that stuff, but was also like a blues guy, kind of a metal guy, rock guy. So I was getting like kind of like religious gospel, easy, pretty music from my mom, and then like sometimes like metal stuff from my dad. So it started off with me just like jamming stuff with him. Growing up, Metallica was the only thing that mattered. It was like that. It was like Metallica, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, like dad core, like the dad bands that. But like Metallica's number one, like always been my favorite band. I celebrate the catalog, like so that was big for me. And then pretty soon after I discovered that using the internet I could look up music by myself. It was a lot of like hearing some songs from the radio. I think like hearing heavy shit like Corn and stuff like that. Like that got me into searching music. And then once I found websites like Wikipedia and like blog spots and stuff like that, like it was over. Like that was what I spent all of my middle school years and high school years was doing, was just like looking shit up and just nerding out over it. I would like peruse like Wikipedia pages, Discogs pages and shit like that, just like looking for new music. But I got all of it at once and I didn't really associate it by genre. Like I got into, like I knew the genres, but I didn't care. I didn't have any elitism on genres at that point. So, I would listen to Cannibal Corpse and also listen to Korn and not feel a way about it or even think that anyone does feel a way about it. So it was funny. I got into a bunch of metal stuff before I got into a bunch of metal core stuff because like most people like nowadays, I feel like they get into like they do like Linkin Park, and then by high school they get into like scene music, like shit like Attack Attack, and like at least the younger kids like my age would, and then they go to hardcore and stuff like that. Whereas I kind of went opposite. I had like older music, like metal shit, and then I found out about new stuff. And I was also in that era of like middle school. I was listening to hardcore and discovering hardcore. I just didn't know it was hardcore. Like my first hardcore bands were probably like I was listening to uh like Hatebreed and shit like that and like Agnostic Front, but I was listening to them on like Nuclear Blast
Right.
and shit like that. So I didn't know that it was hardcore. But this is a story. What can't be understated is for me personally, is the effect that religion and like Christian music actually had on my taste. Um, when I was growing up, obviously I was getting into a bunch of like super heavy like shit, and like my dad didn't care, but like my mom, who was like,
Right.
my religious family, it's like she's not stoked on like the Cannibal Corpse album covers, she's not
Right.
shit. I'm listening to like deathcore songs about like killing women that broke up with you, and like and she's like really not
All
into
right,
it.
let's all pray for supper and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So what I would do is I started my like reach around, my kind of like left turn I did was I would start listening and downloading like Christian hardcore and metal comps instead. So, and then she'd be like, "What's this music?" And I'd be like, "Hey, it's your shit. I'm just listening to it. Oh, look at the lyrics."
Right.
So I would do that. So like a bunch of the hardcore bands that I also grew up listening to was like I grew up listening to like I would download these comps that would have everything from old shit like super early Zayo records and like Living Sacrifice and like shit like that, and then like newer stuff like Impending Doom and like As I Lay Dying and like shit like that. So religious, like Christian metalcore and hardcore, everything from like older stuff like No Innocent Victim, Figure Four, stuff like that, to the deathcore stuff, and the heavier like metalcore stuff. That was also a big part of me growing up. So basically, grew up, all genres of heavy were sick,
Yeah.
and then as my loophole to make my mom more stoked, I also like religious music, Christian metalcore, hardcore was also very important to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of like call it like spirit-filled hardcore or just like Christian radio rock or what have you kind of gets just credited a lot of the time. Like it was kind of the same thing for me where I had Christian household upbringing, and it was going to school, and it was my friends showing me the Demon Hunters, the Underoaths, the As I Lay Dyings, like you said,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, like there's music that is still in the realm of, I guess, the bubble ultimately that is like when you grow up in a Christian household. So and it was the same thing when my mom was like, "Are you sure?" And then I would show her the lyrics, and she would read them and be like, "Oh, they're talking about this, which is a
Oh, that's
passage
nice.
from this." So
Yeah, exactly.
it was the pass ultimately, but it's definitely weird now to not see that kind of go away, but like I've really seen Face Down and like Tooth and Nail and those kind of record labels like really be stagnant as far as like not having or signing new bands and just having
Yeah.
not a lot of people really
Well, that's the thing,
care.
right? Is it became like a fashion statement. Like Christian, like like there was so many like I didn't really think about this at the time, but now it's like now I know that there's bands that legitimately faked being Christian so that they could tap into the Christian fan base. Like Christian metalcore, that used to be a thing,
Yeah.
like a huge thing. It had tours, it was branded, it had labels, like it was this huge thing. And now all of that has pretty much gone away. But there's a couple bands I think that there's a couple bands that still have those fan base. Like I think like August Burns Red is like a
Yeah.
supremely successful band, and I'm a big fan of the band. I have been for a really long time. We played their Christmas show this past year,
Hmm.
but their fan base is still rooted in that, and all their records are consistently like selling wise and all that, like success wise, and that fan base has never gone away. Same thing with like Under Oath, I think, and like a bunch of other things like that. It's like
Yeah.
I think the fan base does still exist, but it definitely like phased out of like just saying it to be popular, because that's used
Right.
to be what it was, you know.
Yeah,
It's,
like you said, like, Scream the Prayer was the big tour that happened every year
yeah,
with, every, Jesus band. And I think the issue for me as someone who's kind of like gone through the ringer as far as like, you know, uh, call it religious identity or just like, figuring out faith versus organized religion, that's a rabbit hole that we could go down for hours. But the seeing a band like Gideon, for example, that's like, yeah, we're not a Christian band anymore, and then like have this sea of people attack them and be like, pray for Gideon. I'm like, these guys are making sick music. I think it's okay for them to say one
yeah,
thing and then say something else 4
yeah.
albums later.
And it's also weird because I know that there's still like Christians in Gideon.
Yeah.
Jake the drummer is still like he's still like a God-fearing guy. He's still like a religious dude. They just like, I think that the reason why they did that was just like they raised the middle finger and did a huge fuck you, because they were like, this feels not only, it feels not genuine,
Yeah.
and not open minded. It feels backwards to be like, to pigeonhole yourself into a thing. So I think they were just trying to separate themselves from that whole
Yeah.
vibe of, which of just like, oh, we only listen to this, like Christians are in their own little like, their little communities of metalcore or hardcore or whatever. And I think they were trying to separate themselves from that. And I think that that is the vibe that a bunch of the Christian bands did moving forward, whether that be like, like As I Lay Dying over time, or like The Devil Wears Prada over the time, or Under Oath, is they were just like, they kind of raised their middle finger, but it's not like they're saying like, fuck you, God. It's they're saying
Right.
like, hey, like, don't be so close minded about, everything,
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. And yeah, it's just strange to see. I do think that time was so pivotal from getting people in the, call it, the Christian space over to hardcore, and just exposing them to that world. Like, I'm an
Absolutely.
example of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very, very interesting. And you know I'm not sure if that will ever have a, like, pun intended, revivals like genre of music, but we'll have to see. So let's get off the Jesus Christian talk. Let's talk about Knocked Loose, because I know that is, like you said, your main baby, your main project. Knocked Loose, it's probably an understatement to say that you guys like kind of changed a lot of things in the DIY, like heavy music kind of space. But I would love to talk with you about some of the early days as far as when the band started, and I guess some of the criticisms early in the days as far as like, oh, like people aren't really latching on to what we're doing, and then there was the jumping off point. So I talked with Pac about this, just as far as the band, I guess ideas wise, was like kind of you in your garage and just like tinkering with songs and structures. And so talk to me about like how it started and just like how your brain wanted to operate on a music project like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I had played when Knock Loose started. I was young, like I'm 23 now. So Knock Loose started when I was like 16, 17. I went on my first tour and started playing shows when I was like 14. Um, so I've been playing music from a very young age. I played in like a crappy metalcore band, just like everyone else did. And I actually played in a metal band with PacSun, like when I was
Okay.
really young. Um, and so like I was in the music scene, and then eventually I found my little like group of homies, and then eventually I got hooked up with Brian and Kevin, the singer and bassist of KL. And the real answer to the question is we were kids that were willing to put in the work, but we were just discovering things. Like we were discovering hardcore while we were playing the shows. Like, so it wasn't like we knew about hardcore and then started Knocked Loose. We started Knocked Loose while we were discovering hardcore. It's like I was learning about hardcore while I was writing pop culture, like the first weeks. So it was like, so basically it's like we were learning about all these sounds, learning about playing shows, learning about all these different, what's cool, what's not cool, all this different shit. We were just like young kids. Like, they were years older than me, but like they were also new to like going to hardcore shows all the time. So it was like basically the early days were me, Brian, and Kevin. Um, and we had a couple different drummers in the beginning. We were just writing music in my garage in a live setting. We wrote like probably like 5 to 10 different demos, like as different bands with different names. Like, one time we were super heavy like a deathcore band. Another time we sounded like Defeater. Another time we sounded like, like fucking like Backtrack. Like another like we would do all these different, and we were just fucking around. And like we played our first show in 2013, I believe. I think 2013, yeah. And I had already been jamming with them for like a year or two, at that point. And it was just like a shitty collection of songs that sounded like every song was different. Like, we had like a really metal song, and then we had like a tough guy song, and then we had like it sounded like trash, but it was like we had these young kids. We were kind of drawing kids in from the metalcore scene, because we were metalcore kids, technically metalcore kids, that were getting into hardcore, and we were taking our metalcore kids with us. So we were like combining the scenes, right? So like a year or so down the line, when we start touring, us personally, as far as Louisville goes, are in the hardcore scene, but the rest of the country doesn't know that.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I got you.
so like basically, as far as the early days go, like before touring and all that, we were just young kids discovering hardcore while we were trying to start our hardcore band. Like we were like, let's do hardcore, but we didn't really know what it
that
was.
means. Yeah.
So it's like now it's like, 7 years down the line or whatever. Like, would I have made all of the musical choices that I made like when I was just fun? Like, fuck no. Like, I listened to our first record and I cringed the fuck out every single time. But like, that being said, it's just like, that's pretty normal. It's just like, that's just what young kids do. So that's like the early days.
Yeah.
Early.
Yeah. And how are you mentioning as far as like combining the scenes, as far as the metalcore kids that, came to shows for breakdowns, and then the hardcore kids that were looking for those two-step parts and kind of combining them? Did you feel like that was kind of like, was that unexpected when you hit the road and you're like, oh, people actually don't know that we're kind of like this in-between hybrid? And was that kind of challenging to kind of prove yourself in a way?
It was kind of off-putting to people, because I think for a lot of people, you're a hardcore kid is you're a band that starts as a hardcore band wanting to play hardcore shows, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you're here to do. No bullshit. Like, no fucking other shit. Like, that for a lot of to a lot of people, that's really important. Whereas we were like, fuck it, we'll do anything. Like, we toured we toured with so many different types of bands. We toured with straight up hardcore bands. Like we toured with bands that sounded like Carry On and fucking like American Nightmare and shit. And then we'd come back with a fucking metalcore band, and then we'd come back with a beatdown band. And so we were doing all this shit. And so I think a lot of people were kind of off put, like, yo, who the fuck do these kids think they are? Like, like kind of like a like they like I don't know them, like, and they're doing all this shit, and yet people are calling them a hardcore band. It's like, why?
Right.
So we had backlash because of that, I think, because we were pretty open-minded about the bands that we'd play with, the music we'd write. And I think to a lot of people, it's like hardcore is not about that. It's a pretty um, it's a very nostalgic genre. People are always looking back. That nowadays bands look back at eras or other bands and they go, let's try to recreate that. And we were never doing that. Like Knock Loose has never ever been like, oh, like this next record should sound like Disembodied, or this next record should sound like Martyr AD, or like whatever. Whereas nowadays you have bands where it's like, okay, let's do Strife. Let's just do Strife, except now, you know. And Nahus never did that. And I think that that really kind of turned some people off to it, or at least it gave people cold feet. Um, but at the same time, you also have the young kids really latched onto it because they
It was
were
new
disco-
and innovative. Yeah.
they were discovering hardcore just like we were. We were similar ages, so a lot of the young kids, you know, were like, oh fuck yeah, this band that like isn't critical of music, and we'll play with a band that sounds like a New York hardcore band, but we'll also play with a band that sounds like A Day to Remember. Like fuck yeah, like
Right.
sick. I'll play anything. Whereas some people fuck with that, some people do not.
Right.
And that's kind of been a mantra. That way of looking at it has been like the theme of the band the entirety of our career.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it is a little, everyone has a different, there's no pressure, I think, externally for people to check out new music. I think that is something that people encourage, but I totally agree that there are people that are very nostalgic about hardcore, that they only like to focus on a certain era, and anything new, like anything that's like post a certain year is like, um, it's not given the time of day that a lot of these bands, in my opinion, deserve. And
Yeah.
I remember I had Carlos from No Echo on, and he's like, I wish I had more time to write about older bands, do like kind of like synopsises on like very crucial releases from the past. But a lot of the traction of his website has been new bands, new releases, and at least for me, I get very ecstatic about finding new bands that are doing a demo, doing a split with this
Yeah.
band, because it just goes on and on and on. Versus like, I think you should do your homework to a degree, but I think you should stress the same efforts for new music as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that I don't like I think that hardcore isn't that nostalgic. Like I don't think that people like kids in hardcore or dudes my age or older than me, like kids from 20 to 30, and that I don't think that they're not checking out new bands. I just think when it comes down to writing their demos,
Yeah.
they're usually going for a thing that's in the past. They're looking back. Whereas like Knocked Loose, like we all listened to different shit, so it was like we knew that we wanted it to be heavy, and like that's it. We were like, we're hardcore kids, like we listen to hardcore, we listen to metal, and we play hardcore shows, and let's write heavy shit,
Yeah.
and that's all it was recently. That's the way it always was. It was never like we didn't know about a bunch of old bands when we started the band.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like I was like, I was like, I found like disembodied while Knock Loose was starting. You know, I was like, you know, and then, you know, years down the line, it's like a band that's super important to me. But like, you know, at the time I was just like, holy fuck, you know. So I was like, you know, that's that it kind of Knock Loose kind of exemplified that like, whoa, like new things, you know. And you know, so you have some people pushing back and some people, you know, and some people latch on to it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, did you ever think that Oldham County would be this thing that like so many of your fans would have latched onto as far as like, you know, people buying the hoodies and all that stuff? Because I like when bands do some kind of callback to where they're from, whether it's like, you know, everyone would be like New York hardcore or California hardcore, but like something that's so small and so niche that only people in your world know. You kind of like used the band as the megaphone of of the county name,
So
which is sick.
it's really a joke. It's really a joke. Like the whole thing was a joke because like if you're at like there is no Oldham County hardcore. Like Oldham County is the suburbs east about 30 miles east of Louisville towards Cincinnati. And it just happens to be like where we all live. You know, so we started it was like our little joke, you know, that we obviously were Louisville hardcore, but we would say that we're OC, like Oldham County hardcore instead. And a bunch of the Louisville heads would get like mad and be like, what the fuck are you doing this shit for? And so we just started milking it, you know, we just started milking it super hard. And then we just steamrolled it. We were like, oh yeah, Oldham, like that merch design looks really cool. You know, we started putting Oldham in, and then like now we just milk it. You know, now we like have this like kind of this almost like streetwear looking line of clothes that we have called, which is the Oldham shit. You know, we print it. It's like usually a crew neck or a hoodie, or we have like a Carhartt shirt, and now it's just like a merch design logo thing that we really, really like. But yeah, it originally started as a joke, you know, because technically we would identify as Louisville hardcore, but we're all from Oldham County, and so we just rep it so hard.
No,
It's funny.
I thought it was a genius idea. Just like, you know, like either if a band's doing some kind of rip of like a local sports team or like a local chain restaurant or whatever, like I think that shit like really at in the moments feels like this is silly. I don't know if people are gonna like it, but it clearly worked on your guys' end.
Yeah. I mean, it ended up working in our favor. You know, a bunch of people latched onto it, but the fact that it did latch on was just a very funny coincidence. You know,
Right.
like very,
Um, so wanted to kind of transition so we can kind of hit on both projects that you're I guess mainly a part of. So Inclination was kind of, at least from when I found out about Knock Loose, the second kind of musical project that I saw that you were a part of. Um, so, you know, sonically the bands are very, very well, I guess there is some crossover, but it's like, you know, if you want to if you want to put it in like your subgenre categories, Knocked Loose is more of a metalcore band and Inclination is like a straight edge hardcore band. So talk to me about, you know, how that project just came to be. Was it like, I'm tired of people being like, oh, Knocked Loose is like in this metalcore bubble, and you just wanted to kind of, like you said, say fuck you and do the full hardcore band? Or tell me some of those processes.
I Knocked Loose has never given a shit about any sort of anything like that. Like people phase in and out of liking Knocked Loose all the time. Like we always have, you know, detractors and shit talkers, but it's never affected me really or anyone else in the band. So we just do our thing regardless. Inclination started technically, the first idea was on a Knock Loose tour. I was on in 2016. I was on tour with Caleb, who's the bass player and of Inclination. We were on tour, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to start a straight edge band?" You know, I wanted to start a straight edge band forever. We were like jamming like while we were setting up sound checking, you know. And he was
Oh,
like, "Yeah,
sorry to cut you off. Was that the tour with with Counterparts and Gideon.
It was the Euro. Yeah, it was Counterparts, Expired, Gideon, but it was the Euro
Oh, okay.
leg of that tour.
Yeah.
So we were just like jamming, like, oh, that'd be sick. Like that was an idea. And then he was like, oh, we'll write it eventually. So in 2017, I get Tyler Short, the singer of the band, and he was, he's a Louisville hardcore dude. He's been around forever, and everyone fucking knows who he is. He was like, yeah, I mean, he'll sing for it. So we got this rough idea, and originally it was gonna sound like it wasn't gonna sound like that. Originally it was gonna sound like Allegiance, like um, super fast, pissed off, but like not breakdowns, like not super heavy, not the super hard parts that Inclination has. But then randomly, I just like sat down one day and just like was writing music, and then like two songs just flowed out, and they were kind of in that vein of like Strife, One King Down ish, like really fast, pretty intense, like some Turmoil parts, some Strife parts, some One King Down parts, but through the lens of like of a bit harder, a bit more abrasive. And I sent the songs to Caleb, I think, and he was like, yo, this is fucked up. Just roll with this. Yeah. And so, yeah, then I wrote that demo in like a week and recorded it at my house, and then was like, Tyler, come check this out, put vocals over it. And then before you know it, it was done. And I actually released it. We said, fuck it, and just released it without even a full lineup. We released it while it was right before Knocked Loose was about to do Warped Tour. So we put it out in the summer of 2017. And then we didn't play a show until the beginning of next year. Our first show was 2018 LDB Fest pre-show.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, we played a couple shows that year, and then I wrote another 5-song guy, released it early last year. And now I'm working on the next one. So it's, as far as writing goes, it's always been just me. It's been me, and then Peter, who plays other guitar, he'll like come in and sometimes work with me on some songs, but it's been very much my vision. And yeah, it was never ever like like, oh, I should do a hardcore band. It was just like, oh, like, it wasn't like I should do a hardcore band in response to anything. It was just like I always played in hardcore bands anyway, so I just like did another one. And it obviously we got kind of a leg up because Hale from Pure Noise was like, yo, I really like this record. I really want a straight edge band on the label. So we got the Pure Noise, kind of hookup, I guess. So, we got kind of lucky being handed with that, being kind of handed that. But other than that, man, it's crazy that people have latched onto that band as much as they have. I never expected to play fests like FYA and, and shit like that. This is hardcore and stuff like that. It was always like, it was, you grow up watching Hate 5-6 videos and stuff like that. It was like, kind of a pipe dream to get to that point. So it's been crazy and kind of surreal that to have a hardcore band play that, because here's an interesting conversation is that it's weird to be in a band like Knocked Loose and that found success in that lane, and then a band that found success the hardcore way, because it's like Knocked Loose has toured up until COVID, tours like 10 months out of the year. So it's like, we don't stop. Like, we worked for everything, so the success that we got, it's all ramped up and we've seen it go up, but it was never like, whoa, crazy, because we were always working. Right. Whereas like the hardcore way of blowing up or doing well is different, because it's like you put out a demo, people on Twitter freak out about it, and then you play a hardcore fest. So it's like, so when people started freaking out about Inclination stuff, like people loved it in Louisville, and I was like, that makes sense. But then like people were freaking out about it, like when we played like FYA and shit and all around the country. And we had a crazy Sound and Fury set last year. And that was unexpected. I was like, this is wild, So, um, yeah, it's very humbling, because it's literally just me on a computer, like writing riffs and recording them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm more than appreciative of anyone that's like checked that shit out. That is like a very fun, like it's the perfect side project band,
Yeah.
So it's very, very
I'm
cool
sure
and unique.
there was a little bit of a balance as far as like, okay, put the first release out and then not like rush to like be the busiest band in the world. So there was a little bit of like okay, there's one set and then people were like just always wanting more. I remember when Drain played in Vancouver, they only played for like 12 minutes and I was like, I need 12, if not more time to see
Yeah.
that band. So yeah, there's a little bit of that, but I think it's also like, yeah, there is a weird thing where a band can literally just put out a demo and then just like not make it overnight, but like at the same time that there's different kind of subgenres where there's a little bit more actual labor to actually bring something to a worldly awareness. So yeah, that
Yeah,
is interesting.
for sure. And one thing is that it's weird because the way that Knocked Loose has gone about it has been very anti that, like when it comes down to the way I view bands, like I don't really like side project bands. I don't like the like demo core way of looking at it, in quotes. Like I don't like the whole like, oh, like record a demo, play some fests, like that. Like personally, like that shit annoys me. Like to me, starting a band was always like, yo, start the band, play, tour your ass off, and like that was always my reality. And now, of course, I'm older now. I get that that's not a reality for most people, but that still exists in me. Like I think that bands don't, like a lot of hardcore bands don't tour anymore. They do weekends and they do the fests and they fly in, and it's like that shit always weirded me out. I was always like, yo, like tour, like and quit your job and tour. And it's like, but obviously, of course, that doesn't make sense for everyone. But it's been funny because a lot of the times I'll do inclination stuff, and it's like in the back of my head, I'll be like, God, I hate that this isn't full time. Like, I hate that this isn't like that we're not touring our asses off and practicing all the time. Cause it's like inclination is like 4 or 5 different members that are all different ages doing different things. I mean, we have like a guitar player in his mid-30s who's a school teacher, So it's like literally just like random Louisville heads, playing for it. So it's like, but yeah, it's funny that I'm in a hardcore band that works like most hardcore bands, but in my head, I'm like so anti that still. I'm like, fuck this, like I want to do more, because if I wasn't so busy in every other aspect, and if the other members weren't so busy, Inclination would probably be doing way more than we do. And maybe we will do more on the next record, because I don't care about hiding it. We're working on the next one right now, so who knows? But it's been very, very humbling that people even still care about it now, because like I said, a lot of the times hardcore bands, their lifespan is one record. Like they do a demo, kids love it, they freak out. They do a full length, kids like it, but probably not as much as the demo, and then they don't like it anymore and they have to break up. So it's like, and then they just start another band. So it's like, for me, it's like we made it to EP number 2. Like, fuck yeah. It's like, and people don't hate it yet. Like, cool. I'm just gonna see how long I can push this, I guess. So we're just gonna keep playing it, and I'll keep writing it, and whatever happens, happens, So
Yeah.
very open-minded.
Personally quite excited about it's an LP that's coming out next, not another EP.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be working on an LP next.
Yeah. So I had a question just this is more of a general, like, kind of straight edge question, because I've been listening to, well, I listened to both EPs today and just kind of listening to lyrical content, and Tyler can probably speak to this maybe a little bit deeper, but um, in your opinion, do you think straight edge music needs to keep this idea, like, what's more important? Is it important to have like straight edge anthems for people that are edge and they've claimed that lifestyle and they are doing that, or should there more be a focus on like attracting people to straight edge? Because there was like comments when the newest EP, when Fear Turns to Confidence comes out, like, this makes me want to be straight edge. And as much
Yeah.
as that is like, oh, that's kind of a funny thing, it honestly is kind of true. When, for myself, I wouldn't consider myself, like, I'm not edge, but I wouldn't consider myself as someone who's like always like partying, and like I don't do drugs. I drink very, very, very occasionally. So there's like parts of straight edge that I really, really enjoy. I'm just like just outside the box of that.
Yeah.
So where does your mind go with that? Like, have people reached out to you guys after listening to the music to be like, hey, like, this made me think about this differently, or how I live my life? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, inclination, I think the where inclination gets the most, and this isn't even a diss to Tyler's lyrics at all, I think inclination gets the most shit from people when they are talking about the lyrics, because a lot of the lyrics are like corny straight edge anthems. Like, we definitely have a bunch of those, that go like full cornball. And it's self-aware, like, we know, and Tyler knows what he's doing. um and I think that when we started the band, Tyler was very honest about wanting that. He's like, yo, 5 songs all about straight edge and how sick it is. And how sick it is in different contexts,
Yeah.
but how sick it is. And then the next record is still kind of the same shit. There's kind of 2 types of inclination songs. There's, like, this person let substances consume their life and that sucks songs. And then there's also like, straight edge is so important to me, and this is why, and this is how it makes me feel songs.
Yeah.
And those are the 2 types of inclination songs.
Yeah.
And dude, it's been crazy. Like, a lot of kids have really latched onto it and been like, yo, this helped me with this, and like, yo, this made me want to be straight edge, or this made me claim edge. Like, we've gotten a lot of that. And I think a lot of that is because of the audience that we have, like the pure noise thing, and the fact that Knocked Loose and Inclination kind of shared some kids, because some
Of course. Yeah. People
people
are like, oh yeah,
people
I'm gonna
found
check that out.
people found Knocked Loose, and then they found Inclination, and then they found straight edge, which makes sense. Yeah, so we've actually seen a lot of inspiring comments about like stuff like that, and I think that it's really important to have both. I think it depends on the band,
Yeah.
because I love a hateful edge band, like I do. Like, I think that they're fucking cool, and I also like corny straight edge anthems. Like, they're sick too, and I think it just depends on the context, and it depends on the band. I think that they're both important. For the next record, it's going we're pretty self-aware about the fact that we just write corny straight edge lyrics right now. Not corny in a derogatory sense, but they're like straightforward, like. And I think for the next record, we're going to try to experiment. I think Tao's going to try to experiment with some deeper themes, that kind of explore different ideas. And but the fact that we are a straight edge band is like really important to us. Whereas a lot of my favorite straight edge bands don't have mostly political lyrics, or have lyrics about different things. Like, Foundation is one of the biggest bands in hardcore, or was, excuse me, and was a true inspiration to so many people. And they were definitely a straight edge band, but like, their lyrics were not edge a bunch. Like, a lot of it was about some of it was political, some of it was anti-religion, some of it, was deeply, rooted in, depression and anxieties. And um, it just depends on the context of the band.
Yeah, for sure.
Inclination started, and we were like, yo, we're a straight edge band, let's be so straight edge, and then that continued through the next record. And now for this next record, I think that we're ready to explore some other themes, while still having some of the, pretty anthemic stuff. But yeah, I think both are important.
Yeah.
I think both are important, and I'm self-aware about everything that I do, and Tyler is too. And so, like, we know that it's pretty straight to the point, but at the same time, it's like that's was also kind of the point of the band when we started it,
Yeah,
you know.
naturally, as one style, if it's like a very posy, like celebratory straight edge band, the pendulum comes this way, it will naturally swing to the other and, have a
Yeah.
fuck you, I'm straight edge kind of band.
Yeah,
So,
and I think, and I like that it has done that. I like the Inclination lyrics, and I think that they've done, yeah, like seeing a lot of kids come up to members of our band and be like, "Hey, like this helped me through this, and like this spoke to me, and this made me claim edge." Like that's awesome. Like I think that straight edge is a very, very important and powerful thing, and I I'm thankful that we've had that effect, and I think that it's a positive effect for sure.
mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see where it goes, but I'm also stoked on where it's been.
Yeah, definitely. Another question, and this is more on the sonic side of inclination. I noticed the first time I heard inclination, the biggest tell as far as like something that not a lot of bands do anymore is like the the slowdowns, the decrescendos that transition into some of those heavier parts. Um, was that something that you were like, "Hey, no one else is doing this. I want to do it," or is that just a natural thing? Because I think it works beautifully well, and I don't see really any other hardcore bands. Usually, it's like stop, tempo change, and then into the next thing. So
It's because I'm writing it by myself. That's why.
Oh, I see.
That's done because that's a thing legitimately just because I'm writing the music, by myself, not in a jam context.
Right.
And because of that, it's easier to change tempos like over time. Like a lot of times I'll write riffs on my computer. So I'll be like, oh, like, what if it did a like descendo instead of like a straight pause? A lot of it, and it adds to the dramaticism
Yep.
of the that's what it does, because a lot of it is like, a lot of Inclination songs are like, holy fuck, the part starts now. It's like it's slowing down and it's speeding up. Like it's a very dramatic band, and there's at the crescendos and descendos really, really add to that. And now they're just like a part of the band. Like I didn't do it on purpose, and now it's like a part of what we do. And it's
Mhm.
actually it sucks because it's actually way more annoying to pull off live.
Oh, for
you
sure.
know, it's way more annoying. And so that's like a really, really funny thing, is that like I wrote it, by myself, and then playing it live and practicing it, we were like, wow, this is like way more annoying than you'd think it is to like
Right.
play. But it's a really important part of how the band sounds, and the newer music that we're writing is for sure still going to have that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I would have never thought that like just because you didn't have a drummer in the room, you're like, okay, I'm playing this way, imagining it slows down. But yeah,
yeah,
you're totally right that like in theory, it's like, if you just have that hard stop, you can dial that in the practice, but you actually have to feel it out in a live setting. Like,
yeah,
oh,
exactly.
is
So
Brian going a little too faster or whatever? So yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's actually really, really hard to pull off. But it sounds so cool on record.
Has there been a
Um,
time live where that hasn't gone 100%, like
oh my
something went sideways?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it sucks because yeah, it's like that's the part of it that annoys me is I'm a perfectionist as far as like music goes. I'm always the negative guy that's like shitting on people for not playing well. And inclination, like because we're a part-time band, like we don't even practice that much. So there's so many times I've been like, oh my God, like it's not how I wanted it in my head, and now I'm fucking annoyed. But like, um, like I'm also like not a dick, so I'm not gonna be like, dude, this isn't exactly how I fucking wanted it to be. Like, I can't believe this. So,
Yeah, we
um,
went down to 140. It's clearly 144. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, fucking, I had to play like a little slower in order to make up for the tempo. Like, it's fine.
yeah.
It's like it's all good.
So as far as like making sure this podcast keeps at that normal time that we do, I know that you also play in a band with Brian called Heartstopper.
Yeah.
And as maybe saving that band for another episode, the main question I did want to get to is we've seen Isaac on the drums and on the guitar. When are we going to see Isaac on the mic fronting a band?
That's something that I've been thinking about for so long. And I've written like multiple demos of different styles, like trying to do it. Um, it'll happen. Like it's going to happen eventually. There's actually a demo that I have on the internet that my friend Jim wrote a long time ago, called "The Lookout," and it's on Bandcamp. And I do vocals on it. It's pretty much like a basic hardcore band. It's like all right, and it was in like 2016 or like 2015 or something. It was a long time ago. But basically it's hard to write because it's like when I'm thinking of like doing vocals for a band, I assume that it's going to be something that I write musically too. So it would be like me doing everything. So I'm just like indecisive of what type of band I want it to be and what type of thing. Because it's like my vocals are like, so it's like I'm doing like super low stuff. Um, but I don't want it to be like a deathcore band. Like there's so much just heavy shit right now. It's like I don't want it to be just that, but it'll happen. So for like, people have been asking that for forever. It'll happen whether I write it, whether someone else writes it. Like it's gonna go down.
Yeah.
But whenever it does happen, I'm gonna make a fucking big deal out of it. Like because people have been asking it for so long. I'm literally gonna be like, yo, there better be like 400 people at the first show, like straight up. Like I get Instagram DMs about this all the time. Like y'all better show out when shows come back. Like straight up.
Yeah, because I remember when I saw you guys, the last time was with Expire Counterparts and Gideon, and then I saw you come on to do a guest spot during Counterparts, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounded really sick. And then
Dude,
it seemed like any live show that your band was playing, it was like trying to find that moment that you can grab the mic.
Yeah, dude, I get roasted. So often because I do so many guest spots, and like at LDB I did like 4 or something. Yeah, I did like 4 or something. I remember Hands of God asked me to do a spot, and I got I was like right next to the microphone, like ready to do the spot, and this dude Jared that I know who like rolls with those dudes looked at me right before I took the mic and just went, another one. And I was like, yeah, and I was like, oh fucking
yeah.
And I was just like, dude, I don't sing for a band. I gotta like fucking
you gotta scratch the itch. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, sorry. So yeah, like I've been wanting to do it for so long. I just like because I like singing. I enjoy it. It's hard as fuck to sing and be a front man, but it's also a lot of fun. So, I hope that when shows come back, whenever that happens in 20 whatever, that's definitely going to be on a top priority is actually nailing down
Well, let me know when that happens so I can be one of those 400 people, and I can film it for
Oh,
anyone else that
oh,
can't be there.
I'll be letting everyone know. I will make a big deal out of it.
That's so funny. So a couple more questions here. I gotta ask you because I know you're obsessed with Cane's, the restaurant.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so first, is that just your go-to? And I had a little thing here where I wanted you to name off if you could reconstruct the U.S. Fast food landscape, what would be like the top 3 places? You know, Knocked Loose is touring all the time, but I know I could hit all these spots wherever I am in the world.
Cane's isn't my go-to in Louisville. It's just I think that their chicken fingers are consistent. I think that their fries are good. They have Texas toast. Um, and
What's that?
they
I don't
have
know what that is.
Texas toast is kind of like garlic bread, but softer. Um,
Okay.
and it's basically, I mean, it's all Southern food. You know, it's all Southern food, and um, it's just like there's this cane sauce that I'm sure you've heard about before. That's just fucking crazy. It makes anything good. It's just so sick. And so I eat it all the time, and then I just made a meme out of it of how much I fuck with it now. Um, it's really good, but it's not my favorite. Like there's Southern food like chicken fingers and stuff like that is like or excuse me, not chicken fingers, fried chicken is like a Southern food thing. And so there's a couple spots in Louisville that are really good. My personal favorite is Joella's, um, which is sick. But down in the South, like Nashville, like Georgia, like fucking Memphis, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, like they all have really sick like local spots that are fucking cool. It's one of the actual like cool things about the South. Um, so yeah, I don't only eat Canes. I actually don't eat it that much when I'm not on tour. I just make a meme out of how much I eat
Right.
it. Fast food in Canes would be on there probably. If it would probably be one. Um,
A Cane's in every state.
Canes in every Canes, Raising Cane's Cookout and Sheets all over the U.S. would probably be sick.
I've heard of Cookout, but not Sheets. So
Sheets is there's two. They're basically like gas station fast food spots that kind of just make everything. It's kind of just like shitty fried food, sandwiches, like all this shit. But it's just good as fuck. There's a big like Wawa versus Sheets argument because Wawa is in like the Northeast, some of the Southeast, and then like Sheets is more so. Sheets is not quite Northeast. It's like Virginia, West Virginia, like shit like that, Ohio. Um, but yeah, it's just like shitty fried food that's like really, really good. It's not like dirty or like super gross or anything, but it's definitely like you're like, oh my god, this is a 3,000 calorie meal. And they just do everything. Like they'll do breakfast foods, they'll do burgers, they'll do any. It's just like the definition of fast food.
it hits
but it's,
all the marks there.
yeah, it's good. So that would probably be Cane's, Cookout, and Sheets is probably an all-encompassing fast food. That's everything. That's everything I could ever want.
Yeah, I'm sure out of everything that we've talked about, that might have upset the most people as far as like, nah, he's wrong.
I mean, yeah, everyone has their preferred
It's
whatever.
all subjective.
It's fine. I'm right. Fuck them. Okay.
Well, Isaac, this has been a blast. The last question, as you know, is our guest's mosh story to end the episode. So whatever
Story.
Yeah, favorite mosh story. So
Oh, this is awesome. This is great. This works out phenomenally. Okay, so it's 2015. We're on tour, or it's a tour kickoff. This is before people actually give a fuck about Knocked Loose. We're tour kickoff. Knocked Loose is headlining. No Victory is direct support, and then Lowered AD is below them. That's the tour package. I'm playing double duty for Knocked Loose and No Victory. I'm playing guitar for No Victory, and it's the tour kickoff in Louisville, and we're playing like a 300, 400 cap room that Louisville used to have. It was right across the bridge in New Albany, Indiana. It used to be where Midwest Bloodfest was. And we were playing there. It's like a 300, 400 cap room, and there's like 70 or 80 paid. So it doesn't look great. So this band that I really like called Worm, WVRM, from South Carolina is playing. They've actually played LDB Fest recently. And they're this like grind band, and the vibes are bad. Like everyone, like there's not that many people there. We're like 2 bands into the 6-band show. And like I'm up front watching Worm, no one's moshing. It's not great. And they're playing they're about to go into their last song. And like there's one song by theirs that like starts out with a mosh part that's super heavy. And I'm like, if they play this song, I'm like 70% gonna mosh. Like I'll mosh, and it's kind of like half because I like it, half because I feel bad. Right. So they start playing it. It's like a guitar only thing, so it's like super heavy. It's like slow. So I'm like, fuck it, here I go. I'm front row. There's like no one else front row. I'm moshing, and I try to do this bicycle kick thing, and I land on a wrong foot. I slip and I fall, hit my head on the concrete, and knock myself the fuck out. Like, knock myself and split my head open. Oh, no. So I'm bleeding, and I knock myself out and hit the head so hard. And then I just wake up like apparently 30 to 40 seconds later, and all my friends are just like, yo, like, are you all right? And I was like, what the fuck just happened? And they were like, you were moshing by yourself and you fucking knocked yourself the fuck out. And then like I like felt woozy, like I was seeing shit, and I was like, this is bad. I don't feel very good. And then people were just like, you have to play now. And so I played 2 sets back to back right after that. Don't remember a fucking thing about any of them. And then had to go on tour the next day. So if I
no
didn't
hospital
really,
visits in between.
Yeah, I didn't feel great, but I just did it anyway. So yeah, actually the only time I've ever been knocked out is when I knocked myself out while moshing. So
wow,
that's probably as good of a mosh story as you can get.
Yeah, I probably the first call it self-inflicted knockout I think ever told on the podcast, though. That is very sick.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it takes one person to get the entire room erupting, and sometimes it just takes one person to knock themselves out.
Yeah, it was God being like, dude, no, like you shouldn't have. Like, come on.
What's that meme where it's like, what if you wanted to mosh, but God said?
Yeah, but God said, yeah, literally, yeah. It was like, dude, read the room. Like, now is time for this. Like,
man, well, what a way to end this episode. Isaac, this has been a blast. Obviously, you and I have crossed paths a couple times, but I really appreciate you giving me an hour-ish of your time. Anything you want to plug, shout out, send people after this episode, the floor is yours for whatever you want to do.
Just keep fucking buying and listening to music. There's in the current times, it's like it's been, we're approaching and getting closer to the year mark without shows, and I think there's a lot of people that are gonna get disinterested in this shit, and a lot of people are going to a lot of people are going to move on to other things, and then there's going to be a lot of people that stick around. So just make sure that when stuff does come back, which it will, because all this COVID shit is going to pass, this too shall pass. Make sure that you're part of a part of your scene when it does come back, that you're there to help, because it's like venues are shutting down everywhere. Louisville doesn't have a venue, right? Literally doesn't have a venue for when shows do come back. Like, we're going to have to work really hard to get shit back up again. I don't know who's going to still be there, but we're going to make it happen, no matter what. So if you're listening to this, just like wherever you are, just like, don't let the circumstances keep you from caring about what's going on. I think that that's really important. When this shit comes back, we're all going to need to kind of work together to get this shit moving. There's been a bunch of cool releases this year, a bunch of releases that have been affected by COVID, that have really hurt bands that were wanting to start their record cycles, like bunch of my friends' friends' records came out this year, like the New Year the Knife record, for example, literally came out as COVID was popping off, make sure that you're listening to those records and that you're streaming those records and that you're there for those bands when they're returning, so.
Yeah, I think I can't remember who said it, but the obvious thing that even though shows have essentially hard stopped, new music has not slowed down by any means. So 100% support bands of any scale that is putting out music. And like you said, like, I think when shows do come back, it's going to be this new era of hardcore where people have to really step it up. Like, okay, my city doesn't have a venue. I have a pretty sizable, like, shitty house that I could have 50 people in. That's the way that I can help.
Call the VFWs, call the shit, work with your older heads if you're younger, and if you're older, work with your younger heads to combine shit and work together. And also, like I said, main point, big thing, check out all the new bands, absolutely, but also don't forget the bands that released stuff when this shit was popping off. Just like I think that's a big deal. Just like, because a lot of bands worked really, really hard to put out something that, unfortunately, given the circumstances, might have been negatively affected. So just be there for those bands. Fucking when shit comes back, work together and make the shit pop off.
Yeah, I'm personally very excited to be at the first show and see the first band ring in for the very first time since when this thing wraps up. So, Isaac, again, this has been a blast. Mad respect for you, and very excited for all the musical adventures that you're a part of. And yeah, I'll be here for that. So, thank you again for coming on the podcast with me.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.